coming up. I don't know, did anybody notice there was something going on in Tampa a few weeks ago? No, but there is a lot of excitement right now because we are dealing with a lot of important issues, and they're especially important for young people to thinking about them because some of these things are falling on your shoulders. And this is the reason I like it so often to come to the universities. And did this a few times in the last couple of years, matter of fact in the last 4 years. So I am so pleased that when I get a chance that the response is so favorable, because I don't come promising and saying that all we need to do is go to the government to solve the problem. What I would like to do is deliver back to you your God-given right to your life. Personal behavior and how the world is run. And quite frankly, I don't think the government is responsible for your personal behavior nor for the economy. It's your responsibility. There's been a lot of talk lately about the fiscal cliff. The fiscal cliff is that event coming up at the beginning of the year. They're terrified that there might be some cuts from the sequestering of funds. But the whole thing is that there aren't any cuts in sequestered funds. There's only cuts on proposed increases. So there aren't any actual cuts. But both sides are hysterical that maybe that the increases won't be as big as they were planned to be. But also the taxes will go up significantly if they don't do something in Washington before the end of the year. My prediction is they will. They'll wait till the last minute and they'll delay it, they'll postpone it. But it would be such a disaster to see taxes dramatically increased on the first part of the year. But my suggestion is rather simple. It's not complicated at all. Those so-called minor cuts, let the cuts come. Don't put the money back in and stop. Don't raise any taxes. What we need are a lot less taxes and a lot less spending, which solve most of our problems. One of the problems that America faces up to, and especially the next generation, and that is Washington right now is in total denial. They're in denial of the seriousness of the problem. And the problem is that we're bankrupt. This country's bankrupt. I mean, $16 trillion in debt and obligation, but that's minor. It's $222 trillion of obligations, for future payouts for the entitlement system. And there's not enough of you there. There are not enough jobs. You can't work hard enough. So Washington's in denial. If they thought it was half as bad as I think it is, they'd cut some spending. And that's what they would have to do. But how do you cut spending if you endorse a system that nobody wants to give up on? Are they going to give up on the welfare state? Oh, no, you can't do that. They consider that immoral. I happen to think the welfare system is immoral. Because it doesn't... The last thing the welfare system is voluntarism. It has nothing to do with voluntarism. I believe in voluntarism, I believe in charity, I believe in helping people, but I don't believe the government is capable of doing that without hurting people, so therefore I reject that. The welfare system works on the notion that the government has this moral responsibility to take from one group to give it to another group. And the argument is always for humanitarian reasons. There are poor people, there are people falling through the cracks that need some help. And it's a pretty powerful argument because too often conservatives and libertarians have a hard time answering that. What do? You don't care about people if you don't steal from this group and give it to the people who need or want something or people who won't work. Well, you have to be able to answer that or we won't be able to solve this problem. Because not only is it immoral to steal from one group, if poor people or people who are down on their luck need something and you have something, you don't endorse the idea that they can march into your house and take something. Why should you be able to send a congressman there to march into the house of the IRS and take it and transfer it over there? That's not right. tough. Let's say the welfare system worked, that prosperity persisted forever, we were all doing well, and there were no poor. You say, well, that's pretty hard. You might argue this theoretical thing about using force and transferring money to help the poor. The whole thing is, you end up with more poor. Just think of all the spending we have. And then the economy turns down because of their shortcomings in understanding of economics. Now we have 46 million people on bread lines. Now they call it food stamps, but those are bread lines. It's just totally out of control. So it doesn't help poor people. Once you endorse the principle of welfarism, guess what? The poor get poorer and the rich get richer. So if you understand the free market economics, understand the business cycle, we do know that there's downturns, there are bubbles, and we've gone through this. We're in the middle of this right now. So the whole system was set up to make sure the poor wouldn't fall through the cracks. So the crisis comes, which is predictable because of the deficits run up to try to satisfy all the special interests. So we get into the crisis, so the Congress and the Federal Reserve has come rushing to the rescue. And guess who receives the benefit? The big banks and the big corporations and foreign governments and foreign central banks, they get the bailouts, and what happens to the poor people that we're supposed to help in the middle class? Middle class individuals lose their jobs and they lose their houses, so it's a totally failed system, and we can't be intimidated by those who argue that if you don't support the welfare transfer system, you're not a humanitarian. If you're a true humanitarian, what you want to defend is liberty and responsibility and a limited government and balance. There is something special happening today, and we're in the time of recognizing the end of a particular era. Probably a 100-year era where we have accepted the idea the government should expand, our government should be the policeman of the world, we should have an income tax, and we should have a Federal Reserve to print money when we need money. But guess what? It hasn't worked, and what this crisis is talking about right now is that it's a failure. It's a failure of the Keynesian theory of economic policy, and therefore we have an opportunity to replace Keynesian intervention, big government involved in the economy, and replace it with free markets, sound money, and a gold standard. That's what... In 1913, of course, dramatic changes. Woodrow Wilson changed our foreign policy. He had a wonderful, idealistic thought that we, the people of the United States, have this moral responsibility to make the world safe for democracy. Just think of what's happened since 1913. I mean, we've been in a lot of wars, and they're pretty persistent. But he also knew, and the progressive era knew that, well, you can't do that. You can't usher in the welfare state and the warfare state without a lot of money. So they have to have the income tax, and of course that has grown. And at the same time, you have to have the backup, which is the Federal Reserve and the printing of money, which means that a major two-step policy that we could have if you really want your freedoms back and in the government. You get rid of the Federal Reserve and you get rid of the income tax. Why don't you become your own government, govern your own lives, and let you keep your money and spend it the way you want to spend it.
His body language seems to be bothered by what's going on right now.
That's a good goal, is getting rid of the taxing system. But tell you what, taxes and the IRS and all the abuse, that's a symptom. It's a symptom of a changed attitude of the American people and what the role of government ought to be. The founders had a precise role of what they thought the government should be. It was very limited. Read Article 1, Section 8. Very little authority for the Congress and the federal government to do the things that they've been doing. So what they have done, though, is they've changed their attitude. They've changed attitude about our responsibilities around the world. I believe very strongly in a strong national defense, but I don't believe in preemptive war. I don't believe in starting wars against countries that have less sympathetic than this crowd. I'll say, even if you disagree with me about changing our foreign policy, I said, we'll win this argument because we're going broke. This is how the Soviet system collapsed. Guess what? The Soviets were so foolish, they got bogged down in Afghanistan. So I would say, let's get home from Afghanistan. Right now! About a welfare system that has failed, change our attitude about free market economics and a sound monetary system and honest money, get rid of the business cycle under those conditions. We wouldn't need all this collection agencies up in Washington, all this invasion of our privacy into our lives. But if that would happen, believe me, this country would change. Right now, we're still a pretty fortunate country. We're pretty wealthy still, but the wealth is dependent on debt and continuous inflation and trust in a currency that doesn't deserve the trust. And we now are seeing a dramatic change. And after this 100 years, there's been a big change, and now we're facing this bankruptcy. We're facing a crisis time which can change dramatically in a short period of time now because the foundations of our liberties have eroded. The foundation of our monetary system has eroded. The foundation of our economic system. The foundation of a sound foreign policy have eroded. So things could get it out of control rather quickly. Matter of fact, I consider the most dangerous spot in the world right now is probably over in the Middle East with Syria. I mean, all these things going on over there, and we're continually involved. Just think of how much money we, the American people, spent on propping up the Egyptians and having this artificial peace with Israel. Oh, this was for the benefit of Israel, the benefit of us, who knows what. But it was like $45 billion we gave to Egypt. And then it ended badly. The people turned against the government that we prop up. We prop up dictators around the world. So there's a revolution going on over there, so we support the revolutionaries, and they happen to be a bunch of bad guys, and they have Al-Qaeda now in those countries. Libya's the same thing. Libya's a mess now. And we, through NATO, not through Congress, you know, that would be one thing that we could do to slow this up. Don't let our government go to war without a declaration of war on
That's right.
But it's up to us to change that. Government is a reflection of the people. If we want a welfare war for a state and it happens, it's our fault. If they're doing things that you don't like, it's up to us to do something about it. And the individuals who participate in that, I don't believe in preemptive war. I believe that you only declare the war and you do it in defense of this country and not to go in and change other governments.
That's right. That's right.
Not only are these wars is, in the past 10 years, over 8,000 Americans have died, counting the contractors and all. And 45,000 come back severely injured or sick and requiring care. We have an epidemic of veterans coming back committing suicide. So this is a big cost, but the cost financially has been, it added $4 trillion of debt to us in these past 10 years, and it hasn't worked. The foreign policy doesn't work any better than the welfare system works. So here we go in. Yes, we went into Iraq. Look, still a bunch of Americans believe we went into Iraq because Iraq had something to do with 9/11. Absolutely false. It had nothing to do with 9/11.
Ridiculous.
So guess what? The American people were told that Al-Qaeda was there, we had to go get them. Al-Qaeda wasn't there. Weapons of mass destruction, nothing there. But then some people said, well, the real reason is the oil. The real reason is we have to really build up so that we can go after the Iranians and overthrow their government as well. But now, the government that's in charge of Iraq is an closer ally of Iran than they are with us.
That's true.
It didn't work. It backfired. The Kurds are very independent now. And there's still a lot of chaos and a lot of killing going on over there. So there's no evidence whatsoever that the foreign policy has helped us. It makes us less secure. And we're at a bigger threat, and of course challenges us financially. So what we need, of course, is a reassessment. A good place to start, whether it's monetary policy or whether it's a welfare system or property rights or civil liberties or the foreign policy, a good place to start, maybe even stop there to improve things, is why don't we make sure that everybody in Washington actually reads the Constitution and obeys the Constitution? And I was on a TV program the other night, and they asked me that question. I think that's the wrong word. I think for too long we've had too much compromise in Washington. They compromise all their principles. Whether it's left or right, they get together because both sides. I mean, have you ever noticed that when we change administrations and one promises to cut, do we get to cuts? Do we get balanced budget? Does the government shrink? No, there's always this compromise. Well, we'll raise this for you if you raise this for us. Raise this welfare over here, raise this for corporate welfare over here. So it continues. I think the answer is more in building coalitions, because the freedom philosophy appeals to a lot of people. It isn't like it's a narrow group of conservatives within the Republican Party and we have to take over the Republican Party to show that we believe in certain things. No, there's a coalition. When you look at the Constitution, if you look at civil liberties, if you look at foreign policy, and if you look at economic policies, all of a sudden you have people who consider themselves liberal. They'll say, you're right about civil liberties. This is one of the things that happens under war. Essentially, civil liberties are attacked. So you can appeal to liberals on civil liberties. You can appeal to liberals who say, yes, we're fighting too many wars. You can come together and have agreements. That, I think, is the way. I think freedom brings people together.
It does.
The freedom message on foreign policy is that, yes, there are a lot of problems around the world. It's just that we don't impose those on the American citizens and tax the American citizens or send our children over there to be killed trying to solve all those problems. But what we do is we recognize that we can at least work toward a more peaceful arrangement by following what the founder said, that is, try diplomacy once in a while, try being friends, try trading with people, quit putting sanctions on everybody that we disapprove of. We've had sanctions on Cuba for 50 years. It hasn't done any good. I say it's time we traded and visited Cuba again. But we certainly see how working across the political spectrum, how freedom for the individual brings us together. And a lot of people think that if you endorse freedom for the individual, that they might do things that you don't approve of. And quite frankly, they might. But is that our business if they're not hurting anybody?
No.
In a free society, responsibility for each and every one of us is on us. Us, the individual, make a decision for our personal lives and our economic lives and our family lives, and not give that responsibility to the government because they'll mess that up too. Civil liberties rather well when it comes to religious liberty, because there are a lot of different religions in this country, and we even, tolerate people who don't want to have a religion. And we should be, we can be personally, critical or want to teach our children a certain way, but we don't tell other people what they have to believe in. We recognize this. Pretty good, and that is we allow people to read books, even controversial books. That's getting a little bit more difficult, but we generally have respected intellectual freedom and religious freedom. If we allow people to make their own decisions about their eternity and what they put into their brain, why is it that we have not adapted and accepted that same principle on what people do with their personal habits and what they put into their bodies? They should assume responsibility. You want your freedom and you want to use your freedom, you should suffer the consequences. But think of history on how many people over the many centuries have suffered from bad intellectual ideas, authoritarianism and communism, and all these things. Millions and millions of people die from this. Think of the abuse under religion. People take a religious and distort religions, and they do evil things in the name of religion. But we don't throw that out. But so often we throw out this responsibility of the individual. We've gotten to the point now where our federal government tells us that you're not allowed to drink raw milk if you want to. As a physician and as a father and grandfather, I think there's way too much abuse of drugs in this country. I think that the biggest problem with the drug abuse in this country are prescription drugs. And when it comes to what they call the illegal drugs, that's a big problem too. But for me, it's the war on the illegal drugs that's a big problem. It's an excuse to violate civil liberties. It's an excuse to spend trillions of dollars since the early 1970s, since the war on drugs really got busy. It's into the trillions of dollars we're spending. And once again, can we show success? Are there no drugs out there anymore? Is it just a wonderful thing that's happened? No. That responsibility, if we live in a moral and a virtuous society, you don't need the government to tell us it's dangerous to do certain things. And that is the problem that we have. This is one of the things that we were warned about this early on. Benjamin Franklin said that the Constitution of freedom doesn't work unless you have a virtuous society. And John Adams said a similar thing. He says you have to have a moral society and a religious society for the Constitution and for freedom to work. So if we decide that if the people aren't behaving like they should, just giving more power to the politicians to make us moral and virtuous, it doesn't work. It doesn't work any better than making the economy work better or the wealth being redistributed or more peace throughout the world. It just compounds it. So what we have done over the many, many years is shift too much authority. The founders understood this, and they tried to prevent it and said, look, it should be a very limited government. If you want government, it should be local government. And yet, I think right now, unfortunately, what you're getting as a generation is looking at it, and a lot of people can come to the conclusion the Constitution hasn't worked that well. I mean, when you look at the votes, just go look at the votes. Look at the last 100 votes that we've had in the House of Representatives. You'd probably say, what are they voting on this stuff for? And why are they spending all this money? So the Constitution hasn't worked. So that means it's really up to the people. Politicians, don't sit back and think, well, one more politician will make the difference. It won't. The people have to change. And Congress... Right now, there's an opportunity for that. The economic policies have failed, and foreign policy has failed. It's not going to work anymore, so we have the chance to offer something different, something better. It's not brand new. They've talked about freedom and limited government for a long time, but it's really pretty new. When you think about how much time has really been spent on a really free society, we probably had the best example in our early history. But most of history is filled with totalitarians, and most of the countries in the world today are still run by totalitarians. So it's been tested so little. What seems like such a shame is when we had a maximum amount of freedom, we had the greatest amount of prosperity ever in the largest middle class. If we don't do anything, we've given up on this. So the opportunity now is, since this system can't continue, is when the time comes where we really have to change policy, let's hope there's enough of us there to influence intellectually, what is happening in Washington. Intellectual changes have to come before revolutionary changes come to a government. There was an intellectual groundwork for our revolution in the early days, and they set the standards that led to the revolution and the writing of the Constitution. But right now, the most optimistic thing is what's happening in the country. There truly is a revolution going on in this country, and people's attitudes are changing. If you look at the record of mankind, they claim that recorded history is probably, about 5,000 years. And when you think how long the universe has been around and the world's been around, and that's a very short period of time. But it was very primitive. Up until when? Just in recent history. I mean, it's 1,000 years ago, it was still very primitive. Even 200 years ago, wasn't society rather primitive before even the steam engine? And then 100 years ago, just think of what it was like. I recall my dad telling me that the most dramatic thing in his life was seeing the gasoline engine come. He delivered milk at a little dairy, and he delivered milk in a horse and buggy. He went to trucks, ended up with a small dairy with 20 trucks. What a dramatic difference. In my lifetime, the thing that fascinated me most was the first time I saw a TV set. And today, though, with the ending of an era, we're going to see a new era. Now, the philosophy is there, the opportunities are there, but you know what's available to us now is the spreading of this information like never before, because we live in the information age. We have an internet, and what we're talking about here today is not something that is narrow in the Republican enclave. This is across the world. Believe me, there are groups of people, even in these countries that you think, no, they're terrible. They're there's always a pocket. They are starting to understand the difference. So there's reason to be optimistic about what is happening today. Technology improved. Just think of the scientific improvements in the last 100 years. Been fantastic. All the conveniences. And yet, what hasn't progressed in that last 100 years? And that is a peaceful solution to mankind's problems. It seems like we've made no progress. The more there has been scientific advancement, they've used those advancements to learn how to kill more people. There's been 200 or 300 million people killed in the 20th century. So all this technology that gives us some wonderful things. So where has the progress? Why has the progress not occurred outside of some materialistic benefits and outside of knowing how to fight and kill each other? At the same time, we have made essentially no progress in knowing how to avoid war. But I think a new era is here. I think right now we can expect that this message is going to be new and different, because in the past we only had little bits and pieces of it. But today it's more available to all of us. It's out there and we can communicate. And it's changing just rapidly in this last 4 or 5 years. It's been dramatically changed. And one great threat to here is, once again, government. If government sees that the internet and communications is a threat, guess what they want to do? They want to crack down on the internet. This is one reason why I have done my very best to always oppose any legislation that would curtail your freedom to use the internet. Sure, go to universities, do your best, but it really falls on your own shoulders. Then your family and friends, you have local responsibilities. We have to be responsible for ourselves and to change ourselves. If each and every one of us would change ourselves and each and every one of us believe this, why would governments do the opposite? Franklin and Adams was right. If the country is immoral, the government's going to be immoral. So it is. Politics, very important. But politics is secondary to this. What I'm talking about, the most important thing is for us to assume this responsibility. We have this free will. We have this moral agency concern about how we run our own lives. And we cannot deliver that to the government. We have to seek to try to make ourselves more virtuous and work for excellence. That should be the goal. If we turn that responsibility over to the government, to say, oh, they're going to make us virtuous. That lends itself to a theocracy, that they get involved in social and personal matters. So the only thing counts is how we take care of ourselves. And why I'm excited about what's happening is the interest shown in this individual responsibility rather than collectivism, which saturated the 20th century. That it is the individuals who then, as they improve themselves, that they can work together with other people. I think this is where we have seen so much progress. It's been said during the campaigns I've had for the last several years that there's a good response for young people. And I think that is wonderful, because I think this makes all the difference in the world. And a lot of people used to say, well, what we need to do is quit this spending because we're going to dump all this debt on the next generation. I don't say that anymore. It's dumped on us right now. Each and every one of us. We're paying the bills right now. That's why we're going to be forced to do something about it. Sometimes it's discouraging because people say, well, you're talking about an individual. We need 51% of the people have to be converted. Not necessarily. It's never happened that way. 51% of the people didn't endorse our revolution against the British. But there was a small group of people, probably 6, 7, 8%, who were determined, who were leaders, who were thought leaders, and others came along. So that's the way it's been for a long time. A majority of people go along and they don't worry too much. Now, I bet you've had people a day or two before the election, who are going to vote for? I got to decide what I'm going to do. They wait, and yet anybody would come to a meeting like this and listen to me. You have to be a little bit different. Given that 8%, the responsibility is heavier on your shoulders, and you will have a lot more influence. You say, well, that's too much work for me. I'll tell you what, if you do it because you have a moral responsibility, that's one reason. You do it because it's for your family, but you also can do it because it's fun. Because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next week or the next day. I mean, all kinds of things can happen in our lives. But, you know, working together with like-minded people, especially when you're talking about something very important like liberty, that can be a lot of fun. And that's what you should have. You should have fun. Approximately 100 years ago, about that same time when we had the progressive era, they divided us. They divided the country. They wanted to talk about economic freedom and personal freedom. And freedom isn't to be broken up. Freedom is personal. It's individual. It's God-given. It's natural to you. And you don't have half of it sitting over here. You have economic freedom, how to spend your money, and somebody else has the other half and says, well, at least I can do my thing and go to the church I want to do, and I can practice my habits as I please, and if I hurt myself, I'll take care of myself. No, it's one and the same. If you have economic freedom, you should be able to have an incentive to work hard, keep what you earn, take care of yourself and your family. On social liberty, you have the responsibility to enjoy yourself. If you take risks, just as in economics, if you take risks, then you fail. You should suffer the consequences and reap the rewards. People will say, well, there'll still be too many poor people. But guess what? In a free and prosperous society, which we've had a taste of, the generosity is going to be there. And medical school, I spent a couple of years practicing medicine before there was Medicare or Medicaid. And I worked in a Catholic hospital, and I was paid the astounding salary of $3 an hour. And I was still learning, and I was glad to do it. And but even then, back then, $3 was a lot. You know, it was a lot more money than $3 would get you today. That's for sure. Nobody was turned away. Everybody had care. It wasn't like people were lying out in the streets and dying without medical care. Now, today, it seems to be more difficult and will get more difficult as we get more and more government involved. So it's a system that I have trouble understanding why we haven't done a better job. Why haven't we been able to convince the masses of people in the large majority and all of Congress say, that makes sense. Peace is better than war. Free markets are better than socialism. Balanced budgets are better than spending. Why do we lose this argument? Because it seems like it's so attractive. I think they don't understand liberty, but they also, the people in this country, have been tempted to think there was something as a free lunch. free lunch, and that the system is biased. Even if you just look at the monetary system without looking at the welfare system biased toward the wealthy, it's estimated that wealthy get twice as many benefits from government than the poor. But if you just look at the monetary system, when you take money and debase the currency, and you just print money, and the value goes down, there is a natural tendency, according to monetary history, that you will undermine the middle class. When we had sound money and more freedom, we always bragged about our middle class, the largest and the richest middle class in the history of the world. But that's not so true anymore. You know, we're not the most capitalistic country in the world today. It's pretty sad when we see countries like China become our banker. I mean, what's the matter with us? When you have a system like the companies are printing money and they pass out the money, they bail out certain people versus the other. But money goes to governments and money goes to banks and money goes to big corporations. They get to spend it early on, and it has more value. When the money circulates over 1 or 2 or 3 years, the value of that money goes down. And even if you don't pay any income tax, you pay the inflation tax. And the inflation tax is truly a tax. But if you want reassurance, all you have to do is listen to our government, our Bureau of Labor Statistics, and our Federal Reserve say, oh, there's no inflation. Prices last year went up 2%, so you're not suffering. And the people on Social Security, they get just a little bit of increase because the prices really aren't going up. But prices are going up. There's some private sources that measures the CPI according to the old method. And they claim your prices, all prices, are going up at the rate of 9%. Also, the private sources tell us that the unemployment rate is closer to 22%. So, have you noticed in this last couple of weeks how great the statistics have been? Every government report that comes out, it sounds like, oh, there are no problems in this country. Houses are being built, the unemployment rate is going down, and there's no inflation. It's wonderful. Let's hope so, but quite frankly, I don't think we should put our head in the sand. We have to believe what is happening. We have to look at the real figures, what real inflation is, what the dangers are around the world, how our civil liberties are being undermined, and then we should wake up and do something about it.
Every single time, that's all I can think of.
Well, there are a few things I would hope that would come with change of the administration, and I will continue to argue the case for these changes. For one, I would like to see the repeal of the National Defense Authorization. Such as drawing up kill lists and assassinating American citizens. Congress has gone along with this. Congress actually passed the National Defense Authorization Act. That gives the President the authority to use the military to arrest anybody they want to, including American citizens, put them in prisons without even a trial and held indefinitely. But you know, their argument is, oh, it hasn't been used all that much. And, you know, like welfare, it starts a little bit, like the income tax, it starts a little bit, but it's the authority and the principle is 100%, and someday it's just liable to grow as conditions, you know, when economic conditions get worse. Look at what's happening in the other countries as economic conditions deteriorate. There's a little bit of disturbance in the streets, and we won't be immune from that. That's why our job is so important, because we do have some time, we do have the method. It is up to us to understand what freedom is all about, how to answer these questions, and not be not succumb to this temptation to say, oh, a little bit of government is okay to take care of so-and-so, but if it leads to what we have today, we have to challenge it. And so we have these two tugs of war going on. One, those in charge probably know they're in trouble, but they're also quite capable of using the National Defense Authorization Act and other things to suppress our civil liberties. To me, to fight this battle, the most important thing we protect are our civil liberties to speak out. The real hero in our society should be the whistleblowers. The people willing to tell us the truth. Laws to protect our whistleblowers, but they generally aren't protected, and they can get put in prison and abused. But what we need to know is what's happening. What's happened in our country, though, over these last several decades, is that you've lost your privacy, and the government has become more secret. And it should be the other way around. Government should be open, and your privacy should be protected. If it continues to go this way, or are we going to promote our ideas and win this intellectual fight? And it's still up for grabs. But I, quite frankly, am convinced that we live in a really great period of time. It's a grand time to be alive. Because I think the opportunities are different than ever before. So if you're for peace, if you're for prosperity and freedom, and if you understand it and you have access, everybody now, 5 years ago or so, I didn't know exactly what, I only knew one type of viruses. It was medical viruses. Then I found out what viruses were when things went viral on the internet. And you send out notices, and every one of you have friends out there. So I can't imagine how many people in this audience would be, how many more people? I mean, you might even have 100 people on there.
I'm Facebooking it right now.
We now are living in this wonderful era because we're further along. But I have to warn you one thing. True freedom has never been tried. We've just talked about it off and on. And it always seemed that we make some progress. We have this scientific progress, but the interpersonal relationship of the human being hasn't progressed. I am optimistic enough that us as human beings can make progress morally and spiritually as well, and we ought to apply this technology for that effort. So it would be a grand thing to live in a society that is promoting peace and prosperity, and I welcome you to the fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.